The polling stopped, the counting begins. Is it a good night for him? Tonight, the big one, a by-election which could mark a political turning point. Voters in Crewe and Nantwich have had their say. We'll have the result in a few hours. How bad a night could it be for Gordon Brown?
The parties have set out their stalls tonight. We find out just who's buying.
That would mean that we'd be right off the end of the swing of it altogether.
Historic by-elections from the past. How important did they really prove to be? Record high oil prices. Will it be like this for years to come? We'll have the latest on the Exeter explosion as a man is arrested. And a different view from Cannes. Newsnight's Stephen Smith's documentary is on show. Did they let him in?
Bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour, Bob. How are you?
I'm okay.
That's me. I've got a film and show. Oh, that's me, in fact.
No. Vous êtes un loser.
Good evening. Simple logic says a by-election is only what it is, a measurement of how voters feel in one area on one day. But politics isn't just about logic. If the voters in Crewe and Nantwich have done as expected and delivered a sharp rebuke to Gordon Brown, it will significantly alter the political weather in this country. The Prime Minister's leadership will be again called into question, and David Cameron might start to believe he really could be Prime Minister. David Grossman is in Crewe. David.
Gavin, the returning officer, is on the stage in Nantwich Town Hall behind me. He's just told us we can expect results something around 1:30 in the morning. They've just started emptying the ballot boxes, putting the ballot papers in piles. But I have to tell you that the briefing and the body language suggest that we may be heading for a Labour loss to the Conservatives, the first such loss for 30 years. Listen to what the Community Secretary Hazel Blears had to say on Question Time. It seems that Labour ministers are preparing us for that eventuality. She said it might be that the electorate has decided to send us a powerful message. This has been a frantic campaign, just 3 weeks, only 2 weeks in fact, since the previous MP, Gwyneth Dunwoody, was actually buried. But in contrast, actually, polling day itself has been a fairly relaxed affair. Which of the parties is closest to Westminster? Market Day in Nantwich is also voting day. Whose prospects are blooming and who is heading for a roasting? Out early, the Liberal Democrat candidate Elizabeth Shenton. She is not expected to take the seat, but does get a bunch of flowers from her husband.
And what was it like being a candidate on election day? I mean, it must be pretty nerve-wracking, pretty stressful.
Actually today I'm really calm and serene and just enjoying the day. I think because it's been such a fast and short, we've only had 3 weeks for the campaign, haven't we? So it's been so fast, and today is just like a relax and go out and meet people, and as I say, because it's become more positive over the past few days, it's just great.
Nantwich is the more conservative end of this traditionally Labour-held constituency. The defining theme of this contest has been dissatisfaction with the government at Westminster. If enough traditional Labour voters stay at home or switch, then the Conservatives will win.
I vote Labour all my life, working man, Conservative this time.
Why is that?
Well, it's hit me in the pocket all the way along. Everything I've done, fuel, food, poll tax, everything I've been hit in the pocket. Wage rises 2 to 3%. Can't afford to give them any more time. Really.
Do you think this will send a message?
I hope so.
You're obviously working hard. Oh, you've been out to vote already, haven't you?
I was earlier.
Yeah, and let her know who you voted for, because they don't believe me.
Oh yes, voted Labour.
Yeah, there we
The
go.
Labour
Thank you very
candidate
much.
is Tamsin Dunwoody, daughter of the MP whose death caused this by-election. The positive side of her campaign has been very much based around the family name. There has been a negative side to the Labour campaign too, fear about immigration and accusing the Conservative candidate of being a toff. It has received a fair bit of criticism. As by-election campaigns go, this one for Labour has been a bit of a stinker. Pretty much nothing has gone right for them until last night, when the Conservatives admitted that they'd sent out by mistake details of 8,000 different voters along with their voting intentions to a journalist in the Isle of Man. This morning then, Labour's leaflet went out. Lost by Tory boy Timpson. Your phone number, your financial records, your address, etc. It goes on. At the end, it says they were sending your personal details to a secretive offshore location for unknown reasons. Sinister or just a bit desperate? This morning you put out a leaflet about the Tories losing people's data. Is that going to help you, do you think?
Well, I think people will be quite surprised that the Tories are so careless that they've lost over 8,000 names, addresses and financial details of the voters in Crewe. I think it's indicative of how they've been organising their campaign. It doesn't bode well for the future for a Tory MP, does it?
What financial details? What?
Well, as I understand it, the information associated was very personal information. Either way, I think that's a very worrying thing to have happened.
In this part of Crewe, there is more support for Labour, but as far as I could detect, not real enthusiasm.
I've always been Labour all my life, so I don't trust the Conservatives, and I don't think Liberals have got a chance. But whoever gets in, you know, it's going to be a long time before anything gets done.
The Conservative campaign is exuding confidence at the moment. Theirs is based on reminding voters about the government's problems and inviting them to send Gordon Brown a message. Eric Pickles is the man who's run the Tory operation in Crewe.
We just laid down some ground rules, which was we were going to fight a positive campaign. We were going to try and ensure that when it was finished, that people of Crewe and Nantwich wouldn't be worse off. And we just got down to it.
Yeah. Do you think Labour helped you at all? Or,
Yes, absolutely. I don't know whether it would be possible to reintroduce political honours, but certainly the leadership of the organisation within the Labour Party deserves, I think, a number of gongs for services to the Conservative Party.
Vote for Gemma Garrett. More money for our armed forces.
This being a by-election, there's an assortment of minor candidates from which to choose as well. Gemma Garrett already has the title of Miss Great Britain. She's standing to promote, among other things, better pay and conditions for Britain's armed forces. The experience, though, has not left her impressed by party politics.
I'm campaigning for some very serious issues, and people have just thought, that I'm a laughingstock and, kind of, took the out of me a wee bit, but I'm standing for real things, and I'm just trying to be one of a normal person and be human. No one other political party has actually even been human to me or even acknowledged me on the street, and that's why politics is in the state that it's in today.
Really? How do they treat you?
Well, they just kind of turn away. The only people that have actually come over and listened to what I had to say was the Lib Dems, so if I don't win tonight, I'd like to see them do very well.
Tomorrow, the communities that make up the Crewe and Nantwich constituency will be able to get on with their lives out of the national gaze. Voting is over. All that's left to be determined who is going to be top dog.
Well, joining us now from Kew is the Government Minister, Liam Byrne. How big a loss are you expecting tonight, Mr Byrne?
Gavin. I'm going to resist all of your seductive questions about guessing what the result is going to be before the result comes in. We've been out fighting very hard today for every vote. We were blessed, obviously, by a fantastic candidate in Tamsin Dunwoody, and we had an extremely well-organised campaign on the ground today.
Right, well, why did that message not get through to your Cabinet colleague Hazel Blears, who's just said that the voters are sending a pretty powerful message, her words, to the Labour government?
I'm not sure, actually, that's what Hazel said. But look, I mean,
well, I've got a transcript here.
Are always difficult.
Send us a pretty powerful message.
But I think, if I may say, with the greatest respect to you, Gavin, that you're reading selectively from the transcript. What I was going to say is that I know by-elections are difficult because I came within an ace of losing one myself 3 or 4 years ago. But actually, difficult by-elections are not unexpected, and actually, they're not going to knock Gordon Brown off course either.
I'm sorry to pursue this, but I have got the quote here. It goes, this is a by-election. You get different results in by-elections than you'll get in a general election. It might be that the electorate have decided to send us a pretty powerful message, following on from the local elections. They weren't good results for us. I mean, you know, that's exactly what your colleague said.
Obviously, the operative word in that sentence is might be. And as I say, I'm not going to get into questions about what the result's going to be. We're going to know what that's like in a few hours' time. By-elections are always difficult, especially mid-term.
Especially when you find a terrible campaign.
The smallest... what I was going to say, actually, is that...
The Tory boy Toff, the Tory boy Timpson campaign, you must be embarrassed by that.
No, actually, Gavin, you've, in the national media, have chosen to focus on that particular part of the campaign. Actually, what was centre stage in Tamsin Dunwoody's campaign here were plans for regeneration of the town centre, plans for the refurbishment at Crewe station, plans for antisocial behaviour. And actually, what people today told me is that they were quite disappointed that all David Cameron had offered today was a lot of angst and no real alternative. David Cameron has sort of littered his campaign literature with messages about send Gordon Brown a message and so on. Actually, there's no alternative that's been offered, and a lot of people have actually picked that up and actually were quite put off by the Conservatives because of the way they handled that complete absence of any policy.
So you're going to win tonight?
Well, as I said in my introductory sentence, I'm going to resist all of your blandishments to speculate on the result a little bit later on.
Do you never ask yourself, though, why Gordon Brown is presiding over a party which does not seem to be able to get its act together on a number of fronts, and we could list them, but it does seem to many people within your own party that Gordon Brown just has not got it together?
No, by-elections are always difficult, particularly 11 years into a government. This is actually the smallest majority of any by-election that we've defended since 1997. Now, on top of that, you've got a global economic slowdown, plus you've got higher inflation, which is feeding through into people feeling the pinch. Now, that is not an ideal platform on which to fight a by-election, but nor is it an indicator of things to come. And as I say, I mean, I was defending a 14,000 Labour majority when I fought the Hodge Hill by-election. I managed to win by an ace, 450 votes. We went on to win a thumping majority in the general election
sorry to interrupt,
a year later.
That's very interesting, but are you actually saying that Gordon Brown is a vote winner for the Labour Party?
Absolutely, because in a year like this year, when you've got a difficult economic situation that we have to steer our economy through...
What's the evidence that Gordon Brown's a vote winner? We saw the May election results in the local elections. Tonight, OK, you won't be drawn out, we've done that bit. If he doesn't win tonight, he is not, by definition, a vote winner for your party.
Absolutely not. By-elections like this are always extremely difficult. What I was about to say just a moment ago is that in 2008, we have to steer a difficult course through a global economic slowdown. That means we have to look hard at how we help family finances, but we have to do that in a way that doesn't sacrifice the medium-term investment in schools, in education and in the police, which we actually know is vital now if places like Crewe and Britain as a whole are to prosper in the years to come. There is no person better qualified to get that balance right than Gordon Brown.
But how many relaunches will you and your Labour MP colleagues put up with before they decide that Gordon Brown's a crock?
Well, I don't think you could call a Queen's speech a relaunch. Actually, what Gordon did in the pre-legislative programme that was set out last week was actually offer some pretty clear directions of travel over the next 12 months. That includes how we make sure that people get access to the healthcare that they need. It's about making sure that we cut through police red tape, make sure police are more accountable. It's about increasing the amount of one-to-one tuition in schools. It's also about giving people the right to request more flexible working arrangements at work and help for first-time buyers as well. So actually, that is exactly the kind of programme that this country needs if we're to get that balance right between mastering the difficulties of a slowdown with the medium-term investment that we need to prosper in the future.
Mr. Byrne, thank you very much. Now, there's no doubt that tonight will be the most watched by-election for some years. But do such contests really matter? Well, sometimes yes. For a sense of historical perspective on tonight, in a moment we'll talk to three men who've had famous by-election victories to their credit. First, Liz MacKean reports.
With all the best by-elections, you get a spectacle, the sight of ordinary voters rising up to take a swing at the party in power. With some, maybe Crewe and Nantwich, you get more than that. You get the launch of the ball that will eventually see the government skittle from office. I'm off to delve into by-election history in search of tooth-crunching examples of electoral knockouts. Mitchell and Morden, that rings a bell. It was in this constituency in South London 26 years ago that the Conservatives last gained a seat at a by-election.
This is a historic victory for Mrs Thatcher and her government.
Angela Rumbold, later a Home Office minister, unexpectedly grabbed the seat from Labour. Vivian Bendel gives his vote to Ilford North, but he's biased. So Mitchell and Morden, now that was a big by-election.
It was a big by-election, but it was a by-election that was won from the SDP because the sitting Labour member changed parties. But of course Ilford North was a bigger one, where in fact I beat Tessa Jowl in the 1978 by-election.
Pollsters are predicting in Dudley West will take place.
In an exciting contest, it's not just people that get hot and bothered.
That would mean that we'd be right off the end of the swingometer altogether. And you'd have actually no Conservative MPs in the Commons at all. The whole thing would be red.
That's the most ridiculous piece of psephology I've ever seen.
1994, the Dudley West by-election. I'll never forget it. Total collapse of the Conservative vote, a 29% swing to Labour. The swingometer, if I remember rightly, couldn't cope at all, so we had to open the door of the House of Commons and show people what the House of Commons would look like if there was a 29% swing to Labour. And it blew up because the graphics simply couldn't cope.
Hello. Tony Blair had been Labour leader for just a few months. The Tories were staring defeat in the face, but they weren't just defeated, they were wiped out. Normally safe, a Tory seat became a Labour seat with a massive majority, and that told us that John Major's government really was doomed and that Tony Blair was reaching parts of the electorate that no Labour leader had reached in a generation.
1990, the Conservative MP for Eastbourne, Ian Gow, was murdered by the IRA. But there was no sympathy vote. Instead, the by-election saw a huge swing to the Lib Dems.
There was talk amongst Tory grandees about being worried about mother, apparently meaning Margaret Thatcher, and indeed, a matter of weeks later, she was gone. John Major, and this is another lesson perhaps for Gordon Brown, John Major was appointed. They went on to win in '92, 2 years later.
All day we've given you, the viewer, a vote on our website. Ashfield, Crosby and others got a mention.
And now this is the result.
But your best by-election is Orpington in 1962, when the Liberals triumphed over the Tories. One of you devoted your wedding speech to the subject.
My guests had to listen to me explain why I thought Orpington was the most significant by-election of the last 50 years. My wife and I are still together.
The government can always put a bad result down to mid-term blues. The general election, when it comes, will have the last word. And this is the prize for the new Member of Parliament for Crewe and Nantwich, a seat at Westminster, and whoever it turns out to be. That turbulent history of by-elections is about to get an update.
Don't you miss that swingometer. I'm joined now by three by-election victors from the past. Lord Hodgson, Robert Hodgson, who won Walsall North for the Tories in 1976. Lord Avebury, who, as Eric Lubbock, you saw there, won Orpington in 1962 for the Liberals and won our vote today. And also Austin Mitchell, who did what Tamsin Dunwoody is hoping to do tonight, proved all the pundits wrong and bucked what seemed to be an anti-Labour trend to win in Grimsby. How much do you think, Lord Hodgson, by-elections really matter?
I think they set the mood within the Westminster village, because I think what it shows is, does the government have a grip or not? And a bad by-election loss means that the grip is evidently slipping. Certainly in my case, it was with Dennis Healey going off to the IMF in Washington for IMF loans that made it look as though the Labour government was losing control. And of course what we're seeing here is that, of course, the Chancellor, now the Prime Minister, is reaping what he has sowed.
Austin Mitchell, what do you make of it? Are they really that important?
No, they're not that important. I mean, they're important psychologically. They set a mood, but they don't do anything else. They have no great lasting effect. You've got to remember, a by-election is an opportunity for slinging off, not slinging out. And people have got a lot of grumbles about the government. We've been in 11 years, and they're being squeezed, frankly. The cost of living, the food, fuel, consumer prices, utility prices, all going up, and they're disgruntled. They're fed up, so they're going to take it out on us.
That's a fair point, Lord Avebury, isn't it? That they might tell us a bit about the government, they might tell us about the mood of people, but they don't tell us who will form the next government in any way.
No, they tell you a lot about who's going. I mean, Margaret Thatcher was mentioned. The poll tax was another one. And in my day, it was the night of the long knives when Macmillan sacked a third of his cabinet immediately afterwards. So there was an effect on the political situation in the day, and indeed in the general election after that, where the Tories lost heavily.
So do you expect, I mean, we had a slight disagreement earlier in the programme about Hazel Blears and the significance of what she said, but the implications seem to be there is a message, there may be a message from voters, and then Gordon Brown has to do something about it.
I think the only fault I'd make with that is that the message is for Gordon Brown. I think the message is for the Labour Party. It's not Gordon Brown alone, it's the whole of the party which is at fault and which is guilty of the sins which the electorate are visiting in the Crewe and Nantwich by-election.
Austin Mitchell, the whole of the party is guilty a bit of this. It's not just world factors, we know about those, but it's the party itself.
Well, we made one big mistake, and that was the abolition of the 10p tax rate, which was a blunder, frankly. It's the sort of thing a Labour government should never have done. But it has produced a widespread compensation in which every basic rate taxpayer is better off. They get a rebate, and that's a good thing. It's a good measure for expanding the economy. It's a nice piece of Keynesianism, and that's sound economics to me, and that's the way we've got to go. And I think the message for the party is, if we do badly, and I think, you know, even if we do badly, support will return to us by the next election, which won't be until May 2010, so support will come back. But if we do badly, then Gordon should listen to the party.
Too late by then.
Lord Hodgson.
Well, I think it's the question of the loss of grip, you see. I mean, Austin Mitchell talks about the change, but what we're doing is we're reversing on this, as on a number of other issues. I mean, the damaging issue for us in the 90s was the RM debacle. And it looked as though we had lost control of events. And once a government is seen to have lost control of events, as is happening with the Labour government at the present, the voters start to lose trust in the government, and it takes a long time to build that back.
And from your experience then, does it also happen on the backbenches, that despite what people will say about pulling together and so on and all rallying behind Gordon, that there will be a lot of mutterings if this is a bad result for
And of course, the longer you've been in power, the more disappointed people there are on the backbenches who feel they've either been overlooked, dumped, or who have talents that haven't been recognised.
Yes. So how about that, Austin Mitchell? In other words, that there's quite a few of you who are discontented for various reasons and may actually be rather worried about the future.
Well, I found in Crewe, as in Grimsby, back in 1977, time of history, isn't it? I found that, you know, they're discontented, they're fed up, but they don't hate us, and they respect the competence of Gordon Brown. In a sense, both parties, major parties in Crewe and Nantwich, are retreated to their comfort zones. The Conservatives were campaigning massively in upmarket Nantwich, and Labour was concentrating on Crewe. And I think the only thing that emerges is that A, Labour Party isn't hated, people are discontented, but B, it's the Liberals that will be squeezed because the Conservative Party is now resurgent, and they'll take votes.
Lord Avebury, I've heard from people campaigning that was one of the problems that Labour faced, that the Lib Dems are not taking enough votes from the Tories. I don't know what you feel about that.
I think in the particular case of Crewe and Nantwich, there has been a squeeze on us, and that arises from the fact that, first of all, we were in third place, quite a poor third place before, but secondly, because the whole of the media presented this as a two-horse race. And I think if we'd had longer to campaign, we might have got over that, as we did in my case, where we had 6 months to prepare for the election. But when you've got a very short campaign like this, it's impossible to counter that propaganda.
My telephone canvassing, and I haven't been to Crewe and Nantwich, but I've been on the telephone, has actually revealed quite a number of Labour switches to Conservatives. I mean, straight across.
Not just a kind of protest. But is that a sealed deal? I mean, one of the points that many people within the Labour Party have made over the past months is they may be irritated by a lot of things that are going on about prices of houses, about price of fuel and so on, but David Cameron has not sealed the deal with the voters.
Well, if you look at by-election results, I lost to John Stonehouse by 18,000 votes in October 1974. I won by 5,000 votes 2 years later, and I lost by 2,500 votes in the general election when Mrs. Thatcher came to power. So that, I mean, in by-elections, there is a degree of volatility, and it will be up to Edward Timpson to dig in and make himself essential to the people of Crewe and Nantwich. And he has 2.5 years or thereabouts, or 2 years to do it.
Austin Mitchell, just a final thought as we wind this up. I mean, do you see any real serious terminal problem for Gordon Brown then now?
No, I don't. I see a little dissatisfaction, and I see a party that needs now to shift its emphasis to trying to revive growth and to distributing it fairly, to giving people a fairer deal and not rewarding so extensively the rich, the better off, the high paid, who've done so well out of this government and haven't contributed their share in the last 11 years. I think that's the signal, but I think it's also a turning point in the sense that the Liberals have done well in all the previous by-elections, and we've not done too badly as a Labour government. We've been able to walk on water for a long time. The Liberals are now going to squeeze, and we're going to have to work harder to prove that we can run the economy not just well, but fairly.
OK, thank you all very much. And there will be full coverage of the election results on the News Channel and on BBC Two, with a special programme presented by John Sopel starting at 10 to 1 tomorrow morning.